Say one of the nicest people in the world, to me, Jimmy Patronis. He's our Chief Financial Officer. He's been in a small business called Captain Anderson's Restaurant, he said, for 30 years. He was a page of the Senate, House of Commons, member of the Florida House of Representatives, Public Service Commission, appointed over Pat Neal to the Chief Financial Officer. And you're really good, and you're really nice. Thank you. You're going to get reelected. What's going to be your most important priority?
And thank you, Senator, for having me. I think the most important priority that I would like to see taken care of in the next legislative cycle is facing the litigation that we're dealing with, assignment benefits. I think that left unchecked, it's a Category 5 financial hurricane for the state of Florida. I think that we just finished an enormous storm season in the state of Florida, and the systems work the way they were supposed to work. But I think that there's unresolved concerns dealing with assignment benefits that the legislature has not addressed.
Jimmy, for 0 for 3 on Indian, it's not a good statement about the Florida legislature. What are you going to do next year, different than last year, to make Florida legislature, particularly the Florida Senate, really pay attention to ADN?
So I think it's the same thing. This past year, we got aggressive with a PTSD issue regarding our first responders. This issue has been out there for years. It has not been addressed. I think that in order to make a difference, you have to go out and hit the road, and you have to take the argument all over the state, and you've got to turn up the volume in the backyards of state legislators and especially state senators to make them understand the importance of this. I look at the room and I see so many different stakeholders that AOB affects every single day. And it's not just Jimmy Patronis that's got to be making the arguments for AOB. I've got to be leveraging each one of you and each one of your associations. And here's the odd thing about AOB. I'm originally born and raised in Northwest Florida. When I talk to citizens of Northwest Florida, they're not that familiar with AOB. It's a Broward, Palm Beach, Dade County issue. It's a Pinellas, Hillsborough, Orange County issue. And it quite hasn't spread into other parts of the state, but it has huge effects to the rest of the state. And the way I get people's attention is I explain to them that they own an insurance company. They own Citizens Insurance. And when they realize Citizens liability expands as AOB is not dealt with, that gets them upset. And I've got to educate other legislators from other parts of the state.
While we're on insurance, of course, because of Castellanos and our Supreme Court's actions, we as business people will all have an increase in our workers' comp rates. Tell us about that. Tell us about your leadership and what you're going to do for businesses in Florida, workers' compensation.
Sure. So for the last 30 years at Captain Anderson's Restaurant, I've dealt with workers' comp issues myself. I've worked with the hurt employee who has not gotten adequate treatment from the carrier. I've worked with the employee who has definitely been gaming the system, and then ultimately the Department of Financial Services has brought up the details for arrest. So I've seen every extreme of what happened to the workers' comp environment. One thing that I do know since 2003, when the legislation Don Brown passed where we had changed the environment, I've seen a workers' comp rate in Florida drop. And I've seen the level of coverage that my employees have gotten still do the job it's intended to do. Now, with Castellanos, unfortunately, it's false. It's purely false. I was talking to a judge a few weeks ago about specifically the ruling, and I was frustrated and upset and frankly disgusted when I understood the genesis of the ruling in Castellanos, and in his words, we needed a leveling effect of the dollars that the attorneys were collecting, and that the attorneys representing the defense attorneys, the insurance carriers, were doing just fine. There was plenty of them doing the business. There was plenty of them employed. Those representing the injured, there was none there, so obviously there was no money going into those circles. And I felt that was, that is not a judicial fix. That is a legislative fix. And if you want to fix that concern that you've got, you go to the legislature just like every other citizen in the state. You don't try to pick winners and losers from sitting on the bench of court. So that was frustrating to me. I hope that we don't see this reemergence of a business model that hurts the ability for businesses to acquire workers' comp insurance to do the job they need to do to grow employees.
Jimmy said the Supreme Court says there has to be a balancing of interests, and the lawyers and claimants have to make out just as well as businesses. That's law made by the Supreme Court. Tell us again what the Florida legislature should do and can do to redefine the law in such a way that we'll have relief, at least not escalating.
Well, I think Danny Burgess has made attempts in the last year. He seems like he's got a good grasp on it. I'm going to continue to work alongside. Hopefully, he files legislation again this year. No motion and traction in the Senate. We'll go back to the drawing board. But the Senate, in my opinion, the last 2 years has not been on the right side of workers' comp or AOB, and I've got to create an environment where more are educated and advocate to get the needle to move there.
Good luck.
Thank you.
When I was interested in getting appointed CFO, I thought our transparency model should be Tell the Truth Texas, or Josh Mandel's initiative in Ohio, which was an interactive system where all state data could be uploaded. It was interactive with taxpayers that would have had state employees' compensation rates, would have had budget items by line and roll down. For taxpayers, people interested in the business of government, a transparent state financial system might be an important priority. Talk to us about what you would do in your full term as CFO, how you get the money and how you get the personnel to implement that.
Sure. And currently, right now in the state of Florida, every contract that we engage becomes visible to the public to review, analyze, see the measurables, the deliverables, the timeline, and also gives the public the opportunity to be educated if that individual or entity or business wants to compete on that same contract the next time it becomes available. So that's been a Herculean effort, but it's in place. We also are aggressive at auditing and reviewing every single one of the state's contracts. If we feel like there's a payment that is out of line, we don't have to sign the check. So we do have the ability to stop payment to force a further investigation whether or not this is in the best interest of the citizens of the state. So, but it doesn't stop there. You bring up exactly the point of concern that I think most people have. They should be able to solve. I saw a tweet from Matt Dixon earlier today about the difficulty it is being able to search some of the different documents for keywords. You know, it's not the 19th century, we're in the 21st century, and the technology is there. We just need to go ahead and implement. But in defense of the mountains we have to steer, when I was in the legislature, I remember I was fighting. I carry a saltwater and hunting combination fishing license, and I bought the lifetime license when I bought it. And I thought, well, you know what, this would be great. I'm going to reach out to highway safety motor vehicles, and I'm going to get them on the same mag strip to encode the fact that I own this lifetime license. You would have thought I was asking them to give me their firstborn child. They were so defensive over sharing the data. We can't trust highway safety with our data. We can't trust FWC with our data. Nobody wanted to. So you have to force them with legislation. And they get so protective over their silos and how they do their job they've got. At the end of the day, keep it simple, make it available, and don't get in the way of what I think should be a no-brainer. We forced a pilot program to take place, and now it's implemented. When you get stopped, depending on the hunting and fishing license you got, it's already a driver's license. So you don't have to carry around two identifications.
Jimmy, if you uploaded the system and had a transparent system, would you put state employee payrolls? Would you put drop payments?
I think so Governor Scott pushed the whole state employee payroll. And I think there's good and bad to it. But I think some of that transparency is important because it is the public's dollars that are going into the payroll of the individuals in the state. I think whenever you've got a tax dollar that is going to the use of the public good, making the public have an easy access to it should be the case. Sometimes it's probably easier to make it by a formal invitation or formal request as opposed to something electronically, but I think the more you can move to transparency, I'll take it one step. I had a preacher from New Zealand in my office a few weeks ago. And I think I'm a religious person, but I got really taken by meeting this guy. And so as I am sitting there wanting to talk policy with him, I asked him, I said, preacher, I said, how do you stop greed in the process? And just like that, he said, the transparency. And, and it stuck with me. You just don't realize what you might meet from somebody that just wants to make an appointment, and he's right.
Jimmy, in 1986, our state created the Florida Accounting and Information Resource. Still have it. MS-DOS. I think there's 6 guys in your office who can write code.
Thank you, Fun.
MS, I funded it 32 years ago. TaxWatch has had this as a priority. We now have a state, North Highlands reports says we should spend $280 million over the next 7 years creating our new replacement for FLIP. Tell us about that. Tell us the level of priority. You might tell us how you're going to overcome agency objection to having a cabinet officer manage our state financial system. And tell at the end of your 8 years, what's going to double up on it.
So Flair processes $90 billion worth of payments every year. An issue that happened a few years ago. We got a budget that when it comes to Medicaid dollars, sometimes the transfer of dollars is over $1 billion. Well, it wasn't that long ago. Flair was at an impasse because it couldn't handle that many zeros. So we've got, as the senator points out, we had an issue that we've outgrown. Making the transition back under Tom Gallagher. Tom Gallagher had started an initiative and spent $100 million back when he was CFO to start to make this transition. He ultimately runs for governor. Alex Sink inherits it. She walks away from the $100 million worth of investment that's taking place. So, so under Jeff Atwater, we were nursing the system. Well, and just like the senator points out, we've got a handful of people in their 70s that are even qualified to even work on this system anymore. So we have started the whole procurement process of ironing out the next generation of going from Flair to what's called Palm. And again, this gets back to what I just spoke to a minute ago with FWC and Highway Motor Safety, is making all the children want to talk to each other. So as we've got this arcade, I left Kate my phone. Kate, you got that?
Says your time's up.
So, but is this system that is making this transition, getting all these children to work together? We've got modules that work between Flair, a module, and the operating system that, like even every one of our tax collectors got for remitting back to the state. So we've got to streamline each one of those with the new program that we're going to move forward with. That will carry us for the next several decades, hopefully at least 2 decades. But it's an 8-year transition. It is a $300 million, 8+, 7+ year transition into the next generation. And then you make the arguments: do you go custom? Do you go with an off-the-shelf version? I know me personally. When I was at the restaurant, I was buying a new server for our food inventory. So as I'm looking for, I bought a new server, and then I've got to move my food inventory software to the new server. And I'm starting to realize I can't make the transition. So I get on the phone, I'm calling to a company that hosts our program out in Arizona, and I'm dealing with this backwards, non-customer service oriented company that is charging me, $2,500 a year for maintenance. And then when I want to make this transition, it was just throwing the roadblocks at me. So I call a friend of mine who's in the restaurant business, and he's all over the world bringing new products online. I said, I need a new solution for inventory management for my groceries. So he turns me on to this group, the apps on my phone. But literally, I've gone from having to manually enter in every single one of my invoices in order to track my food costs at Harrison's restaurant. Well, now the invoice comes in, I snap a picture of it with my smartphone, it's automatically OCR'd, and then now, without me even entering a single thing onto a server anymore, I don't even have to use a server anymore in the business. It's all cloud-based, but I still own my data, but now the app is so smart, it tells me, hey, did you know you paid 14% less for crab meat last week than this week? So the technology that is out there and available is pretty amazing. And then that's just the one instance of how it complemented my business. And how many times is that the case where we're not even maybe contemplating at the state level? I hate to go and ask that question in the middle of a $300 million transition, but I've just seen, from what I've seen in the private sector, that there's smarter solutions than what I was dealing with day in and day out.
You're going to get it done in 8 years.
That's my goal.
And $300 million.
That's hopefully less than that.
You'll get the other cabinet agencies on board.
As long as we elect good Republicans, I think I can make arguments for it.
This morning, your office and I've asked my staff to develop a new plan which will strategically phase out our business tax. And you're talking about our state corporate income tax, which Governor Askew pushed in 1971 and redone in 1972. Tell us about the plan, how you're going to implement it, how you're going to replace the revenue, or if you're going to replace the revenue.
So, early this week, I was in New York State. I was in New York City meeting with folks that are interested in moving to the state of Florida. And I start to realize more and more that we already had a pretty good migration from the Northeast down to the state of Florida because of our no income tax environment. But this crippling effect it has had on the reason why folks will stay in the state of New York because of the federal tax law changes we've had. So as our team starts looking into it, that because of the corporate income tax structure in the state of Florida, there's actually a 13%, we're collecting 13% more than they would before because of the changes. So we'll start to aggressively pursue it. I think we need to stay as competitive as possible in the state of Florida to want to. I just know this. Years ago, and he probably learned it from you, but Alan Metz made a comment to me. He said that, Jimmy, the citizens of the state of Florida spend their money better than Tallahassee does. So as I've become a real true believer of that, as you work in a family business and you see every night what we're remitting in sales tax and taxes back to the state, I realize I need to do everything I can to keep as much money in your pocket. If I keep that as kind of my goal as I work through the day and work through our issues, I feel like there's better prosperity. Then again, I love to see people make money. I've got a couple employees that work for me that they are far more talented to be able to work for me than the Department of Financial Services. But I think they're taking advantage of the opportunity to get some experience. But I'm gonna be the first person to shove them out the door if they've got an opportunity to find a better paycheck. Because I want people to make as much money as humanly possible. And in the restaurant business, we had 200 employees, and my adage was, and the biggest group of the employees demographic was the waitresses. And I always knew, as long as a waitress is making money, I'm not worried about anybody else in the restaurant. Because if the waitress is making money, that means the kitchen is producing good, hot, tasty food. That means the bartenders are getting the drinks out on time. That means the hostesses are getting the tables seated in an adequate time. And the bussers are taking a good job of cleaning the tables. If any of those other issues pick up, you're going to have a disgruntled customer that's going to take it out on the waitress. So as long as I always ensure that the waitresses are happy, I look at their reports and seeing that they've got money in their pocket, I knew the restaurant's healthy. I feel the same thing way about our state employees. If I can give you the tools to go find more money somewhere else, then we're doing the right thing.
David, did you listen to that answer as to how to have a happy restaurant?
I've added that to my pace comment that I always use for you. I got this one, if the waitress is happy, then.
Almost happy, everyone's happy.
That's right.
I thought that was a really good explanation of how a restaurant works. Free enterprise experience.
Well, and that's the way I feel like that's the way I kind of apply that to the taxpayers of the state of Florida. If I can be, in a place where I can influence the taxpayer, have more money in their pocket, they're going to go out and spend it. And they're going to go buy things, and they're going to do things, and they're going to travel and vacation, and they're going to take care of those essentials, and they're going to have, money to pay bills.
Who's got a question for Jimmy Patronis? Dominic Calabro has one.
Combination.
Watch out, Jimmy.
I recognize you with that beard.
I like it.
Yeah, it makes you look thin.
Really?
Yeah, I like it.
Listen, I heard that makes you distinguished, intelligent, or thin. So what was I, stupid, fat, and go ahead. All kidding aside. First of all, thank you, seriously, for your long-standing service in the House of Representatives, now as CFO. The question I really want to ask you is about pension. First of all, we'll work with you, or whoever is in that position, to try to phase that out. First, we want to get rid of the business rent tax. That just, we're doing
Yes.
this. Yeah,
Yes.
right? Let's get rid of the business rent tax. Thanks to the Realtor Association, they're looking to really do that. We're the only ones that have it in the country. except the city of New York, they're not stable. Well, it's a state of mind. Pensions. Now, I know, we have it's a big iceberg, and it's really a lot bigger, more problematic than most people realize, but I'm not even going to get into phasing out, defined benefit plans with DC or whatever. Just the actuarial estimated rate of return is like, I think, 7.65%. And Ben Watkins runs the state board of bond finance. So they fought hours and hours just to get it from 7.65 to 7.60 or something like that. If we actually rated, that's over 30 years, each year over 30 years, if we rated it actuarially correct, it'd probably be somewhere around 5.5.
Sure.
So we wouldn't be at 84% funding, as Rick Scott pointed out, we'd probably be around 72. The point is, we need to have and know the truth, because the demographics are changing, people are living longer, generally, and we've got this big liability. That Wine Barnett, by the way, reminds me, is really debt. So whatever tens of billions we owe, they're coming first. Sure. Pay that before you pay anything else. So could you talk a little bit about that and how you would put pressure to be transparent and accountable so we really get the right number and then begin to deal with the problem?
Well, I was part of the 2011 legislative session when we made some changes to the state's pension fund, and that was a heavy lift, but I think it was critical. I think it's important people have skin in the game no matter what business they're in, and I think it's just in my business, as I pay taxes to the state, I care about what the state or the local government does with my taxes. I feel that the same way goes for our state's pension plan. The 3% contribution that was taking place, it was never in place before. Bringing that online, I think, was critical. There was $1 billion right there that the state was
State locals.
Sure. But serious. That's serious money. I don't know if since 2011 the legislature's really had the stomach to want to touch retirement again. But it's real. It's a real concern. And again, the unfunded liability is exactly what you said. Just what Barney said. It's debt. I use New Jersey as the poster child when I'm talking. I was in New York, and New Jersey's pension fund is funded at 44%. Their average debt per capita in New Jersey is $4,400. The state of Florida is about $1,100. There's gonna be a day of reckoning, and I don't know why anybody would want to move to a New Jersey or an Illinois or a California, and knowing that at some point there's going to be a true up that's going to take place. So I get very self-conscious and concerned about the status of the debt of the state of Florida. I think Governor Scott, as he assumed office, there was a lot about the state that he was going to learn about. But the one thing that he did attack the state on was debt, aggressive refinance, and protecting our AAA bond rating, refinancing as aggressively as possible, and taking those real savings that he knew he could at least hit the reset button on. $10 billion worth of state debt paid on. There hasn't been $1 of state debt paid on since Bob Martinez was governor. So you kind of think about it, we pat ourselves on the back as a state legislature that we balance the budget, okay? Well, the Constitution says you have to, okay? It's not that it was, we've done something that was miraculous. So anyway, I think you bring up a valid point. The legislature deals with it the way they typically deal with it. They throw money at it. And there probably needs to be a little bit more thought put into
Yeah, that one
the
does
actual
take
side.
legislative action to get the correct actual assumption.
Sure.
Is to say, stop the shenanigans, and let's, maybe it's
See the real numbers.
6.5 or 6, but it's not 7.6.
Sure. Well said.
Who else has a question for Chief Financial Officer? Mr. Gomez.
Costa.
Quick question.
Going back to the workers' comp issue, Florida is one of only, I think, 3 or 4 states that does not have competitive rate making in workers' comp. We have an organization called NCCI, and you have a unitary rate.
Sure.
So why don't we have competitive rate making in workers' comp insurance, number one? And as you continue your role as CFO, you work towards that.
Well, thank you for that question. As I told somebody the other day, I said, there's the Department of Financial Services and the CFO's office. I mean, we've got more jurisdictions and product lines and SKUs than a grocery store does. So as I'm starting to sink my teeth into all these different opportunities we've got to tighten things up, some of the realities we've got are exactly with the rate making process. You know, I had the comments being made to me yesterday when it comes to some of our insurance fraud that's taking place. You know, we're submitting cases forward, our investigators submitting cases forward, but we're not seeing enough prosecution on behalf of the state's attorneys. How do we get, you know, a more engagement in that whole circle? But I'm open to the dialogue of having a true competitive market-based rate setting process. Unfortunately, sometimes the legislature likes to play games with how some of the services can be delivered, or who's going to be actually doing the fulfillment of those services that politically make some of this a little more complicated of a change than you know, on the surface. Again, I think it's all part of my learning curve and being able to embrace it and try to make as much sense out of it, which is going to bring as much prosperity to somebody's bottom line of the business.
Let me ask this question back to Fausto and to you, Jimmy. Why in the world would we not have a competitive rate making basis?
Well, good question. To tell you the truth, I don't know how long it's been the case, but there's a lot of things I learn every day. I got questioned the other day about AOB, and you know, what do I think about AOB? I said, you know what? It's a debate we need to have, and this is no different. It's a debate we need to have. You know, the support of the status quo, I need to have a full understanding and gravity of why that is the status quo.
Who's going to have a question for Jimmy?
Thank you. How you doing? When you joined the cabinet, what are some of the challenges that outside of the traditional CFO role that have raised or kept you up at night in that role?
And you bring up a fantastic question, and it's what the senator brought up earlier, is the transition from Flair to Palm. To me, that one issue is such a transformational issue that is affecting, you know, potentially the next 25 years of the state of Florida's ability to process and finance and pay bills, pay state employees, maintain services, and in trying to flip one switch. I was talking the other day. If you look at our airline consolidations that had taken place, so you had Delta Northwest, you've had Air Trans Southwest, you've had United and Continental, and you had American and US Air. So, and all these mergers have taken place years ago. Currently, right now, American and US Airways still running two separate standalone systems. Continental and United, two separate standalone systems. You know, so AirTran and Southwest bit the bullet and said, "My gosh, we're going to have one system." They put Delta Northwest, they merged the longest ago. They bit the bullet. So again, one of the issues that we've got is dealing with this many different children that we're having to say, today is the day, D-Day. Today is the day you're going to make the transition. And unfortunately, as you have lobbyists that have interests in the various scopes of work of these different agencies, as you've got lobbyists that represent different technology vendors, as you have maybe potentially a different party affiliation in the cabinet, all those are huge dynamics that affect the ability we execute and force that transition to take place. So if you want to know what keeps you up at night, that one issue right there. That's probably a lot more detail than you wanted to hear, but there's just that many moving parts. And that's why I can see where, you know what? Gosh, I really, do I have a couple more Band-Aids we can put on this thing for at least the next 8 years and let somebody else deal with it? No, you know what? The decision's been made, and it's my job to take it seriously.
David, Mann, you have a question?
Jimmy, two questions. 8 years is a long time. Is anybody going to be left that can actually run Flair in 8 years? And is there a way to speed the plow?
My goal is to do exactly what you're saying, speed the plow. And that, I think, is critical. And now here's what happened in 8 years. Getting back to the vendors issue, Oh, there are vendors out there that have found all these, because there are state employees who have retired that are still capable to do the work, but now they have found their ways into consulting firms, and they're no longer a state employee, so they're going to become as an attractive Band-Aid, and they're going to be pushing their talented former Flair employees on us as maintenance teams in order to keep the transition moving along. You know, my hope is not to see that as a solution as much as maybe a lifeboat if we get to that point. But speeding up the plow means less of those type of contracted services I have to lean on to bring this in for landing.
And then one more question. So you've entered this political arena you're in. Was there a defining moment that caused you, or a defining person that caused you to choose this path? And what are a couple of the core values that guide you as you are a leader in our state?
So there's two people that I think were the only reason why I'm here. Number one, the governor. Couldn't be here but what for him. And then two, my wife. My wife's putting up with a lot right now, and she has been the same. And I never thought I love my wife now more than I ever did. I don't know if it's because of the sacrifice that she's making right now, as we're traveling a lot, and she's helped raise two boys. I'm going up in Sarasota tonight. My goal is to be home either back in Panama City tonight or first thing tomorrow morning, and make my son's baseball game. We're taking the political side of this to the degree where we're traveling 6 days a week. We've done 18,000 miles in the last, and behind the windshield in Ocala, 18,000 miles in the last 3 months. And I know that the harder that I work, that I can find rest later. I also, I find, you know, a lot of, my 7-year-old, there's local race taking place in Panama City. And my 7-year-old knows, as you remember with your own kids, how they love to find favor with daddy. So my 7-year-old, talking to him last night, there's local municipal races taking place. And he's so excited to tell me the outcome of those races. And he feels like he's telling me this insider information. And I'm thinking, what's my say? Is Johnny reading the newspaper? You know? And he's telling me, he says, Bernie Thompson lost and Jeff McConnell won. And I go, really? You know? And I'm missing not getting that in person. But, you know, today it's a new day, and I know that the sacrifice that they're making for me is allowing me to make the sacrifice to try to take this job seriously.
Jimmy, thanks for coming to be with us today. Thanks for your service to our state this last year. Thanks for all you've done for our state. Hope you're having fun. Hope you change the world.